Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Prolix, Comix, Bollix with myself, Nicholas O'Sheacon, and himself,
Clive Davis. Hello.
And today we are following up on a lead that came up thanks to a book. I don't remember what it's called actually, because my memory is turning into Swiss cheese. But it was a book by Mishima Yukio.
Yeah.
Something with winter in the title, maybe, or snow.
Spring Snow.
Spring Snow. There we go. We read a book called Spring Snow for another show that we do. And while researching about Mishima, one of the things that came up was that Mishima was a big fan of a manga artist called HIROSHI HIRATA. So at that point, I made a note that you know, longtime viewers of our shows. Gino,
as if they.
Yeah, Gino. Gino knows.
Yeah.
Gino knows that I am an enormous fan of samurai manga, particularly this.
Tick your bingo cards, everyone.
There you go.
I'll be making a very inappropriate comment sometime in the next 5 minutes, and then I'll be handing the baton over to Nick. He'll be mentioning Thomas Mian.
Yep.
And then it'll be back to me, and I'll say, yeah, something else horrendous that shouldn't be. Yeah. So you know, business as usual.
Yes. No surprises here. So basically, what I discovered was when doing a search for what written by HIROSHI HIRATA is available in English, I discovered next to nothing that's in print. In fact, this is the only thing that was easily findable that is in print. He had a series about the Satsuma, not the oranges,
something like that.
But yeah, samurai that was done for Dark Horse, or well, translated by Dark Horse. But like everything else,
3 volumes, I believe, right? Yeah.
But like everything else that they did, like all of this stuff, it's incredibly hard to find now out of print.
Okay, that's a shame. I was about to go looking on the back of this, but it's
well, the first volume you may be able to find at a reasonable price, but the volumes 2 and 3 suddenly escalate wildly. I feel like Dark Horse does this where they print their comics, they print the first few numbers of anything in quite high numbers, and then they start shrinking it down based on what they think the audience is. So you end up with volumes 1, 2, and 3 of something sometimes, or in this case, volume 1 of something. There was tons of them made, and then they rapidly reduced the print run of the follow-up volumes.
Bit of a Dark Horse, those Dark Horse comics.
Yes.
Actually, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't know what the etymology of bit of a Dark Horse. Is it racist? I don't know. Usually these things involving
often they
color racist, right?
A dark horse in the running.
But what does that mean? Like,
we clearly need to start a show called Etymological as Feck.
I think so.
Okay.
That's what the world is crying out for.
yes. Where we talk about words. So yeah. Anyway, so this is kind of what there is. But boy, was I pleased.
Yeah.
Actually turned out to be.
Sorry, I was under the impression that you had actually read this before and it was a favorite of yours.
No. I bought this sight unseen at the same time you ordered it. It showed up, and then it sat on my bookshelf for quite a few months because we hadn't gotten around to it yet, and then it came up in the rotation. I read it twice this week. In fact, I read it once one day, and I came back to it the second day. I was like, was that as good as I think it was? And also as crazy as I think it was. And so I
starts off with a few color of semi-colored panels as well, and then turns into black and white for the rest of it. So what little I know about
HIROSHI HIRATA, I'm certain at this point he's 25 apparently when this comes out, and he was primarily working in and around the Kansai region. There was this time at the beginning of kind of like the boom in Gekiga, right? Adult comics, not necessarily meaning pornographic.
He earlier abandoned the old in Tokyo chat or details.
Exactly. And a lot of the guys working in this weren't actually working for stuff that was sold on at newsagents or at the market. They were sold directly to lending libraries.
Yeah, I think mobile lending libraries as well, maybe I'm thinking.
Yes.
The Nihon or something like that they're called.
Yeah, so this would have been something that would have been published in one of those kind of anthologies that was going into those lending libraries.
Oddly
As it
enough,
turns out,
I don't know if you had one of these when you grew up in rural Ireland. Did you have a mobile library come to your town? Because we had one. We had one that came down our little cul-de-sac, and it was like a van, and but you could have steps and you could go in, and in the back it did have like 3 walls.
Come into my van, I have reading materials for you.
Pretty much, and I also happen to have some puppies in the corner if you're just a little boy. So I got more at home. No, it was legit. It was a legit. No.
My wife is mentioning that apparently in Kelowna they had them. They didn't have them in Wicklow. Wicklow was such a small town. There was 6,000 people and very hilly. We did have a proper
6,000 is a metropolis compared to my village. So I'm surprised.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had a bricks and mortar library like that when we just went there. Yeah, I'm afraid so.
Clearly, you come from well-heeled stock,
right? But I wished we'd had a comics library. Those you have to pay hard currency for down at the newsagents.
Right.
But so one thing that it's interested me was when I was looking like there's way more of Hirata's stuff available in Italian and French, like huge swaths of his library seem to have been translated into those languages, but next to nothing into English. And
even,
based on this,
we'll get to this, even Hindi, right?
Yes, exactly. So it's a real like proper crying shame that this stuff hasn't, and he also seems to have done, and I don't know if it's based on the front cover, based on the drawing, it has to be at least partially based on the movies, but he did an adaptation of Zatoichi. But I'm wondering if it's an adaptation of the original, like serialized novel, as opposed to an adaptation. You know what I mean? Like I'd be interested to know he chose a few of the movies, or if it's an original story.
Because he died not that long ago, right? And he was still fairly active.
Last year, apparently.
Okay, yeah. I don't know where this jumps into my head, and I don't know if I've just made this up or if I actually read it somewhere, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but there's a small little tickle in my brain saying I'm wondering if it might be a tie-in with the 1989 directed film, but I could just be totally, I just made that up, but
could well be, as you said. He seems to have had a very long career, and as I said, Mishima was a big fan, which makes this is fascinating, especially this volume. Imagining Mishima being like,
right. But as we discussed previously, Mishima was a whole bunch of weird and strange and fascinating and conflicting, and and we're going to say, I'm pretty sure we'll probably talk Mishima again in the future, because
I will be coming back to him in one format or another, I think. But so I didn't know anything about the context of this book. I had no idea that it would come, for example, with, I thought, fairly interesting lengthy essays at the back about the context under which this book got basically banned, pulled from bookshops or lending libraries, and then reissued in a heavily redacted form. In fact, I couldn't help but when I was reading this, I'm looking at the redacted pages. Like there's, for example, here's one where you can see there's a whole bunch of X's that have taken out the or here, like this, all this text is gone, and there's circles over certain words. This immediately brought to mind, I had just, you may not know this, Clive, but I had recently read translation of Gilgamesh.
No, I had no idea. Why would you be doing something like that?
It's for this other thing I'm doing. But anyway, so
you're
this
not
immediately
holding me with other YouTube videos, I hope.
But yeah, so I just finished reading the Andrew George version of Gilgamesh, and then started to read this, and was like, this all seems very familiar to me. This making the reader aware, like not just not just
like chopping them out, right? Like
because there's all kinds of things you can do, but in this case we're going to focus your attention on the fact. Now, the actual text of the version we read is not redacted, because there isn't.
We should say a shout out to Ryan Holmberg as well, right? Who's the guy who's translated this and also written one of the Very interesting essays, which we'll get to the background. And to your point as well, now that I'm done with this, holding it to the camera and I read it, I shall be immediately handing this off to my wife, actually, because so she can read it in an unredacted form, because she won't be able to do that in Japanese.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah.
And maybe the last thing I'll say before we get into the actual story is that I think I was completely taken with the art in here.
Oh yeah.
And there's a few reasons. One is because he does this thing that I don't often see, actually, or I guess maybe I do, but he does. He has a deft touch with this that I think few artists have. You know, some of it's quite realistic looking, right?
Yeah.
Characters are drawn in, you know, and he's got a wonderful line quality. Like his brushes are right in there. It has this kind of almost look of this like Sumi ink painting, you know. And in fact,
it reminded me as well of calligraphy, in so much as you can almost see the act of it having been drawn in the.
Yes. And in fact, you might know this or you might not, but he's also famous.
It's one or the other.
Yeah, it's probably. Yeah. He's more famous in the West for his calligraphy than he is for his own drawing.
That makes sense.
He did all the calligraphy in Akira.
Okay.
Katsu, whatever.
Katsuhiro.
Katsuhiro, yeah. None of those big, thick, beautiful, like Akira, like all that's by him.
The covers and things.
Yeah. All that's by Hirata.
Oh, that's interesting.
So yeah, but then he has these wonderful, like almost like Calvin and Hobbesy, like very like cartoony.
I also like there's this whole section here, which is also fascinating because you can tell he's an experimenter. There's this whole bit. There's nothing like this in the whole book, but there's this section where we slowly close in on someone's nose.
Yeah.
That's totally brilliant. In the foreground. And that's great. And I also like the punchline is this character going, fuck's sake, I wish they'd be quiet.
Yes.
It just slightly undercuts. There's a nice dose of humor in there, right?
Yes, in what otherwise is kind of an
sparingly used. Yeah.
You know, harrowing. But then yes, this stuff like it's like political cartooning or something. Some of these faces are just so well drawn. You can see that they're exaggerations, but you can also see the kind of people that they
right
be, you know.
But to your point, it's almost night and day with the other stuff, which is much more kind of not photorealist exactly, but more in more, you know, trying to be somewhat
realistic as opposed to cartoon.
Yeah, exactly. So he just in those terms, it's a fascinating kind of. He's clearly, even at this early age, and he's not polished yet, from what I understand. He kind of reworked this story, right?
Yes.
Which apparently is he's become an even better artist, and his draftsmanship is impeccable. So but even at this, it's clearly he's like someone very adept at juggling forms, right? Like I can do this like this. I'm in the mood to do this like this, and you know, there's very few people who can do that and do it well, right? And also make it non-jarring, because it's not really jarring, right?
No. He sees it's effortlessly goes from the one to the other.
Yeah.
And in some cases it's used for different effects. In some cases it's used for, like, as I said, like a comedic effect, but in other cases it's just to make something more grotesque by drawing it in this kind of
and if you can,
exaggerated way.
If you can make me, because I'm a fucking moron when it comes to any type of fine arts. I'm a total dunce. I don't know anything. So if you can make me speak of these things, even on my you know not very sophisticated level, but just on my base, even to get me to speak of these things means you're doing something right? You're poking a chimpanzee to, you know, it's something more sophisticated than where the next banana is coming from.
Right. Yeah, you've been a little hard on yourself, Clive. But yeah,
I do like bananas.
This is a character that I really love. Just for that face. It's just so, again, I can see, like, it makes me think there's a specific Japanese character actor from samurai movies that
Yeah.
immediately makes me think
Or
of this.
Luigi Montefiore or something.
Yes, yeah, totally. So what's also interesting in some of the background to this, which maybe right before we get to the story we could talk about is, and have you seen this movie by Ichikawa Kon that's mentioned?
No, The Broken Commandment. No, it's interesting. It's been on my list. I have a copy because it's one I'm actually planning to watch with the wife because she wants to
and
see
it's
it. But
it's
I
based
wanted
on
to,
it's based on a novel as well.
yes, I wanted to read the novel first, which is why I haven't watched the film yet. But now this is kind of pushed it up the list. So I think I'm going to have. In fact, I'm wondering if you're keen on reading the novel as well.
Oh yeah,
we might do it as little.
Yeah, we can definitely add it to the list. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting how they mention. So we're kind of doing this ass backwards, but there's a thing to do with the Eta and the Burakumin, which we're allowed to say.
Yes.
Yeah, he points out something to do with. Actually, this is okay. Let's talk about the story. Let's talk about the Burakumin, and then let's talk about that period of time of the early film, because that took me down another rabbit hole, which I didn't even realize that I had been circling. And it just something jumped out at me, and it made a whole load of things click into place for me. And it was fascinating. But anyway, what is the basic story then, Nick?
So basically, there's this young guy whose name is I think it's Gentaro. Is his last Genosuke. Gen sticks in your mind because he carves that into everyone's foreheads later in the story when he's offing them. So Inoko Genosuke is this young man who is in a sword school, basically, and he is too intense. At the beginning of the story, at the beginning of the story, he's too full on. He's freaking everybody out because he won't. All he wants to do is spar, and he wants to go basically till he's dead. Like he doesn't
he'll never concede, right? Never concede.
Back down. Yeah. So the other people, including the teachers, start to kind of, we don't really want to spar with you, buddy, because you're freaking us out. And the teacher tells them
they're forced to,
fight for their lives.
Him really badly before he stays down, right? Like opening an artery up, or
and so his teacher basically tells him, look, they're afraid they're going to kill you because you're putting them into fight or flight. This is not practice. You're engaging them in actual combat. I
bet Mishima loved this bit.
Yes, yeah. And then and so basically he goes to the so I guess then one of the guys agrees to train him, right?
Yes.
Basically, like
everyone else,
nobody else wants to deal with it. One of the guys agrees to train with him, and it ends up getting ugly again because he just doesn't know when to back down.
He's betrayed, right? He's betrayed he sees a betrayal by his teacher, and and it's a betrayal because of a specific thing in his past, which I think we
So I guess basically to make a short version, he attempts to actually give the shogun a letter, right? Saying you need to treat the Eta or the Burakumin better, and then he's restrained from doing that because they're like, that's a executable offense is to petition the shogun without warning like this. He drops the letter in his flustered state. It's seen by the other members of the school. They realize he is a Burakumin or an Eta, which to people who don't know, and I feel like we might have talked about this somewhere in one of our many other shows along the way.
A little bit, yeah.
Basically, they are a class akin to the Untouchables in India.
Yes.
Which is why this was chosen to be translated.
Well, that kind of makes sense,
fascinating thing, but we'll get to that when we get to
might get to that actually in the next episode if we can get our hands on a certain thing or not.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
But in any case, so I mean, how much do you know? I mean, I don't actually honestly, and clearly what comes out of this book is what little I do know I learned really from the end notes, because this is partly why Hirata gets in so much trouble, is because he gives us one version of the history of the Burakumin or the Eta in Japan, and it may not be as accurate as,
Well, I think in terms of time periods, entirely inaccurate, right? But
Right.
it's he's kind of appropriated something from one time period and taken it back to another time period where it wasn't the case, right? But
Okay.
and to be fair, I had Barakumin, I was very familiar with this phrase. The etta phrase specific, I hadn't heard that before.
Okay.
I have to admit. I think that's a very specific one. But basically the Barakumin thing in general, yeah, like you said, they were the lowest on the totem pole, right? And these were people who dealt in flesh or death in some way, right? Oddly enough, actually, I was telling my wife I was going to give her this book today, this manga, and I was telling her a little bit about what it was like, and she clued me into something which was quite interesting. Was she's currently reading a book about the old execution grounds in Minami Senju.
So it's funny. I used to walk past Suzugamori every day going to and from work, and that's also an old execution ground as well.
And apparently the executioners would have been of the Barakumin class.
Okay.
So even the executioners, which I mean ostensibly are working for, you know, the state and the shogun and the emperor as well. Yeah. But they would have been of the same ilk as your tanners, your butchers, your leathermen, anything that was fleshy and stinky, and they were referred to as non-human, right?
Yes. And so would Night Soil people as well have been?
No, I don't think so. I think that's
okay, because there wasn't necessarily death involved.
Yes. Plus, as well, I'm thinking different cultural mores attached to different things. Like, I don't think it's so much that they call them dirty and filthy, because I think shit is a different thing. Whereas there's the element of death and destruction and decay, right? I'm guessing it's I don't know if you follow it back, if it's like a Confucian thing or
a Buddhist, where again
Shinto, I don't know. But but then
they become a very marginalized community, right? In Japan, the parts of the cities in which they live become kind of synonymous with them, and therefore nobody wants to live there.
Famously, what happened, because it's interesting, is that what I didn't realize until reading the introduction and stuff, I didn't realize that this was even more predominant in the Kansai and Kitakyushu. I was only familiar because I'd read about it happening in Kanto as well, right? Because it was a famous case not that long ago. I think it was something like up until about the early 80s or something. There was still a kind of samizat underground, basically like a dictionary or an encyclopedia that all companies had. Where if someone was applying for work, you could look up the name and then trace back by whatever kanji they were. You could trace back the family and generations to see if they came from Barakumin stock, and you would have been essentially locked out of certain forms of employment. And quite rightfully, at a certain point, the Barakumin Defense League, or whatever they're called, who it's interesting. It's quite interesting to read the introduction here as well. I think Ryan Holberg does a good job of balancing, like, yes, on the one hand, they were maybe over censorious here, but then putting it in context. But on the other hand, there's all this shit going on. So you can kind of understand why they would have been so zealous about just stamping. I mean, it's the same argument we're into now, isn't it? In the woke age, where some people are saying, well, you can't just pretend hate speech doesn't matter because it's going to bubble under the surface and it's going to get worse. And then other people saying, no, you cannot give this thing a platform. It's still an ongoing debate. Best way to deal with this kind of vile.
And then it's interesting too. Again, maybe we'll get into it at the end, but like when it comes to history as well, like if you want to write about history, do you have to or not have to use the words that were historically used, right? If you're going to publish Uncle Tom's Cabin and put it in a school library, what do you do? Do you redact the words, or do you put a note in there saying this is going to have highly offensive language that will certainly upset you, depending on your family background?
And it's also case by case and contextual. I mean, for instance, some people, and to be fair, these are usually assholes, but some people have a problem with the colorblind casting of Shakespeare's plays, right? Their argument being, oh, they wouldn't have been a Black King of Scotland, or they wouldn't have been, that's what they mourn about. And yes, I suppose you're right. If you were doing a history book,
yes,
but it's Shakespeare. It's a different thing, right? It's not. I think people sometimes forget Shakespeare it's not history, right?
No,
exactly. No. It's speculative historical fiction, and all at this point mythological. Like in the same way you might have been talking Gilgamesh with someone else in another show. I mean, Gilgamesh is, you could cast Gilgamesh with anyone now. It wouldn't matter.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter. And I think Shakespeare's approaching that as well, right? But of course, certain kinds of people just use anything as an excuse. Unfortunately, they use things that are borderline valid, which is what makes them annoying, because they appropriate these things to anyway.
Oh yeah.
So before we get into this, because I think this is, before we get into that, because that's the stuff in the background of it, let's finish up
the story.
Half of the story, because it quickly goes away from being that.
Oh, you mean when it becomes Todd Browning's
Freaks? Yeah, basically,
Samurai, so basically, so it gets out that he's Burakumin. He starts getting in fights with other people. He ends up actually killing somebody who insults him in the thing. He goes to the sensei. The sensei, he finally pours his heart and tells the sensei that he is Burakumin. The sensei tells him, "Don't worry about it. It's going to be okay." He trains for 5 more years, seemingly okay, always being kind of excluded by the majority, marginalized, but not by the teacher. Finally, he's offered a chance to participate in I don't know if it's a duel or some kind of martial arts situation where the winner will get to marry the local daimyo's daughter or somebody important's daughter, right?
Right. Clearly that's not happening, right, for him.
Well, so although he's told, that's the problem, is he's told it maybe will. It's in that moment of like wanting to, like, I just it feels like his teacher's like, he just says this without really thinking it through. Like, oh yeah, no, you're fine. Yeah, you'll be included.
I think the teacher has it, but he's gone the path of least resistance, isn't he, in his way? It's like, I don't want to argue with this guy. It's going to be easier to let him think he had a chance and then kill him and then slay him in the competition. In
the duel, yes. But unfortunately, he talks about this and is overheard by the Burakumin young student who feels obviously betrayed. Kills the teacher and then basically goes on the run and vows to kill everyone else in the dojo. Which he does slowly, one by one, right? It's yes, he does, but then things kind of catch up with him. He ends up
it's like a weird samurai version of like kind hearts and coronets for a little bit, right? I kept imagining all the characters being played by Alex Guinness in different wigs.
Right. And then he kind of comes a cropper of Big Nose, who we've already showed you, who comes back and kind of, that part I couldn't figure out, because is that the part? No, it's not. It's later on. So anyway, Big Nose just says like, I'm a big guy. I'm kind of freaky looking. Everyone always used to make fun of me, and I'm from a poor background, and I feel your pain, buddy. I want to help you out.
Yeah.
But you did kill the teacher, so I have to hack your legs off. So
right.
He dices his legs off.
We should mention as well, previous to that, this is not the first. The reason it's called Bloody Stump Samurai is because when he's taking out a lot of people as well, he's removing them, all their arms and legs and heads.
Yes. And so then
it's a violent fucking comic.
It's crazy
for 1962, especially.
And so he ends up in. So we see him at the. We've looked at the part where he's at the doctor's house with the guy. He keeps saying, "I'm going to kill you as soon as I'm better. You're dead."
Right.
But then another couple of guys walk in, and then he ends up losing the arms as well. At which point he kind of stumps his way out and then eats grass and bugs for a while, and decides he's going to turn himself into a snake. In maybe the strangest part of the. Maybe you want to talk about that.
I think.
Yes.
I think we might leave that for the reader to discover themselves, but it is
that
shit crazy. but awesome, and also made me think of, as well as Todd Browning's Freaks, especially in terms of like, you know, that whole thing about, because we did Freaks on the podcast with Ron before, and that whole thing about like, yeah, that Freaks justice thing at the end, that's like, that's almost making them more monstrous than any of the horrible characters did. But at the same time, it's, yeah. Anyway, but also as well as that, it reminded me of there's that Edgar Allan Poe story where the guy comes back from war without arms and legs.
Oh,
like,
yes,
Ishii.
yes, totally. So yeah, I mean, basically then he takes to, he breaks his sword in half. He uses wisteria vines to tie his blades onto his stumps.
Also this version, I love to read, which you can't really see it there, but Yamagami Tatsuhiko's, and the English title they got, which I don't think is a proper one because I don't think it's ever translated, but the Vicissitudes of the Demon Blade, which seems to actually retell a story where he is literally a bug.
Yes.
In this case.
So yeah, so he drops out of trees with his blades and he continues his awesome. Merciless vengeance. And then,
why is this not a film? Why is this not a film?
Well, we know, sadly, because that's exactly what I was the whole time. I was like, this completely should have been made in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, by, you know, by the same people who were doing all of those like Demon Spies and all those crazy over the top.
Or at least an anime, right? Where you could do justice to that stuff, you know, without the, you know, see-through effect, because it would be quite difficult to pull off, I think.
I feel like Teruo Ishii
might have got a go at it, yeah.
I think he could have done it really well, because he did do some straight, well, not straight, but he did do some samurai stuff as well as all the horror stuff.
Right.
I don't even know if, I don't think we should tell how it actually ends, but basically.
No, there's no need to.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's this interesting kind of, on the one hand, flagging up. There's, you know, there's a bit of wanting to highlight the plight of the Burakumin, but then mixed in with this freak horror, holy shit, super violent stuff. I mean, get yourself a copy of this, seriously, before it goes out of print again and gets really expensive, right? It's fantastic. Thank you, Nick, for choosing this. But so also complementing it are a couple of essays. One by Kure Tomofusa, which I don't think was written specifically for this, right? It's been translated, I think. It was something written. Yeah, no, I think it was written for the 2004 release in Japan. The redacted. Which was redacted, yeah. And he seems like quite the manga historian as well, right? Like he writes very well, and I mean, reading his his essay and him referring to in my book this, and I wish I could either read Japanese really well or someone would translate all this stuff. He sounds he's a great cantankerous guy. That, you know, like that essay is various asides that are real, like really nice swipes at other writers and stuff, and there's some quite funny stuff in there. And I mean, I don't know, I don't have the context, but if I had to put money on it, my money's on him. He seems like a guy with a head on his shoulders. Like, if he's taking swipes at people, I'm guessing there's probably a reason to. Oh yeah, I would think so. That's where I'm putting my money anyway. Yeah, quite enjoyed that. And it's also interesting too, because he seems to be coming from a left-wing perspective, but has no time for like the Communist Party line of the time on there's in his de rigueur beret at the time. Yes, it was a big thing. I think that was the main question they asked manga artists, I believe, back in the day, right? Do you have your own beret? Beret, I'm sorry, you can't work here. Yes. And also this essay by Ryan Holmberg. Again, I don't know if Ryan Holmberg's done, I'm going to look him up to see if he's done any other translations or provided any other interesting introduction, because this is good as well, the whole introduction and the whole thing about the history of the censorship. I mean, we mentioned it a little bit. I think we should probably leave the reader to discover that for themselves. But essentially, because of all that sensitivity around the Burakumin thing, I mean, the thing was virtually just, you couldn't read it at all for over 40 years in Japan. And then it comes out in this redacted version. and now you can read it unredacted, but only in English, as far as I can tell, or whatever other languages it's been translated into. But no, this whole thing as a whole packet is a great fucking comic. I want to read more Hiroshi Hirata. And yeah, no, this is great. This is when did this come out, actually, Nick? Is this a relatively recent?
A very good question. I don't actually know. Let's take a look. Does it have a date in it?
It doesn't actually, I don't think. Strangely enough.
That's weird. Let's go take a look at the back.
In the middle, maybe. This is good podcasting.
Yeah, this is
YouTube
fantastic.
Or just look up things.
Is there a date at the end of the first essay?
No,
maybe
there's nothing. No.
Wow, mystery. Okay, so I have to look this up yourselves, folks. You're gonna have to Google this.
But it came out somewhere between 2004 and now. I'm guessing closer to now would be my guess.
Yes, I would
guessing
guess so.
Post 2010 at least.
It was also interesting to note that, did you notice when we were reading this that there is a another I guess comic that came up against some of the same concerns, is a adaptation of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms.
Yeah.
that jumped out of the page. I mean, I was like, oh, and again,
something else that's been on our minds a lot recently, right?
Yeah. It was weird how many different things came out of this that kind of connected to other things we've talked about recently. But I wouldn't mind reading that version of the
original one. Yeah, well, that's the kind of thing you want to take notes of as well, because I was thinking, oh man, if that's even translated, which one am I getting? And but then of course that way lies madness, as we know. Yes. But we like a bit of madness, probably a bit too much, really.
Yes, yeah. No,
anyway,
I strongly recommend it to anyone who's got well, if you're not easily offended, I guess, by all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Because there's various levels, I guess, upon which you could be offended by this. But
you're probably not watching this anyway, either.
But you're probably not. No. And this is Samurai Comics, with all the bits that I want.
Yeah.
High quality art, crazy story.
Yeah.
Takes no time to get going. We're right in the. It's almost too much, like the breakneck. Because I mean, that's like he'll just jump 5 years later. Like, in order to not give you any downtime from the madness, it's just these various time jumps. But
yeah, great stuff. Filmmakers, take note. Someone's got to do this. Someone's got to do this.
Does Takashi Miike do anything like this anymore, or is he long past doing?
I'm sure he could still, given the right screenwriter, and I'm sure he could bring it again, like back in the day. I bumped into him once in the Toho Cinemas lot, so next time I might bring it up.
There you go. Have your copy of this ready, and he'll be terrified because it's banned. Get that out of my face.
Right. Until next time, where we may or may not be returning to this well. We won't mention it just in case we can't. But yeah. Okay. Cheerio then. Bye bye.